Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me. What I'd like to do is, first of all, welcome you to the Autoimmune Revolution live Q&A follow-up. And I apologize if you were on last time and you couldn't get through because we had some major technical difficulties. So thanks again for taking time out of your busy day to come and join me. We're going to go live here in just a few minutes. So what I'd like you to do, a little housekeeping, is just type in there into your chat box if you can hear me. If you can hear me, just type in, yes, we can hear you. And that way I know that we're live and that I'm coming through loud and clear. Okay, it looks like sound is live and everybody's hearing me. So again, we're just going to wait a couple of minutes as we're waiting for everybody to jump on and before we start diving into questions. So just 1 or 2 more minutes here and we're going to go live. Okay, while we're waiting, I'm going to pull up a poll for everybody. If you can just give me your feedback, I'm going to try to direct this live Q&A toward as many questions as we can get answered. But if you give me some feedback, that would be fantastic. So you're going to see on your screen there some general questions. If you just give me your feedback, it's going to help me help you much better. All right. So poll results are coming in. It looks like, well, the vast majority of the folks in the room are pointing at thyroid disease or thyroid conditions. Close second to that is autoimmune arthritides in the muscles, joints, things like lupus, RA, fibromyalgia, etc. And then we've got, coming in behind that is bowel inflammatory autoimmune problems. And then there's other classification. So there's a lot of variance in the room. So, okay, we're going to try to get, like I said, we have about 500 questions that were submitted for this webinar. And there's no way I'm going to be able to get through all of them, but I'm certainly going to try to get through as many as we can. So let's dive in to the Q&A. All righty. So the first question that we got in, and again, thank you for submitting your questions. This question comes from Janet out of Sweden. Janet asks, basically, What is the difference between the two tests designed to check thyroid antibodies? There's a TPO antibody test, and then there's a thyroglobulin antibody test. Well, the big difference is both of these types of tests show for positive autoimmune hypothyroidism. The difference is the mechanism. So in one case, there's an enzyme called thyroid peroxidase or thyroperoxidase, also sometimes abbreviated as TPO. This enzyme is attacked by the immune system, and that enzyme is very, very critical for helping your body produce thyroid hormone. The other antibody test is thyroglobulin antibodies. And basically, thyroglobulin is the protein backbone to thyroid hormone. So having a thyroglobulin antibody is just a different way that your immune system will attack the way that your thyroid gland is supposed to make thyroid hormone. So both of them are markers or indicators for what's also known as Hashimoto's disease. And so doctors, when checking for your thyroid, at least effectively, will look at both of these types of tests. A lot of doctors will only measure TPO. And just perfect example, I had this happen in the clinic yesterday. I had a patient with high levels of anti-thyroglobulin antibodies, but not high levels of TPO. And a lot of doctors will not check the thyroglobulin antibody. And so in this particular case, that could have been missed had we not done a thorough check. Okay, let's move into the next question. Okay. So question coming in from Liat. Liat is asking, she says, I have hypothyroidism, but cannot take any meds due to mitral valve prolapse and the negative effects the meds have on my heart. What natural regime can I use to boost my thyroid? So if you can't take the medicine, you have hypothyroidism, I want to remind you of what we discussed in the summit. If you watch the summit on day 7, I gave very, very lengthy 2.5-hour presentation called the Autoimmune Health Matrix. And in that, we talked about what can be done for autoimmune disease, meaning what do you do naturally to boost an autoimmune thyroid condition if you can't take the medications? You have to have a good functional medicine doctor look at those fundamental pieces. If you recall those fundamental things, the 4 fundamental umbrellical categorical causes of autoimmune disease, the first being infections, the second being vitamin and mineral deficiencies, the third being chemical exposures, and the fourth being food-based allergens. So if you look at those 4 things, that's the best natural option that you have if you don't tolerate the medicine. Now, on that same note, I would say that many of you that are taking, especially Synthroid, if you're on that medicine and you are gluten sensitive and you've been told to avoid gluten, understand that medicine does contain gluten. And so if you're on it and you need to take it, it's very, very important that you work with your doctor to get your prescription compounded to contain the same medication without the filler, without the gluten and grain-based fillers. Okay, these are good questions. Bonnie's asking, can chronic migraine be a symptom of autoimmune disease? Yes, as a matter of fact, migraines themselves are a form of autoimmune disease. A true migraine is a form of autoimmunity. And what we think happens, this is the theory on migraines, there's 2 premises. One is that there's an autoimmune attack against the nerves, and that triggers the migraine, the nerves being in the brain. And then another theory is that there's an autoimmune attack against the blood vessels in the brain that trigger the autoimmune. And I have actually seen both be the case, but migraine is definitely an autoimmune condition. So going back to, again, what we talked about, the reason I put together that very lengthy presentation during the autoimmune revolution was to help you understand that it doesn't matter what type of autoimmune disease you've been diagnosed with. If you don't start from the premise of identifying foods, chemicals, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, and infectious agents, then you're going to chase your tail. It doesn't matter whether you have RA, whether you have lupus, whether you have scleroderma, whether you have hypothyroidism, whether you have osteoporosis, which can be a form of autoimmune disease. So it doesn't matter what we call the autoimmune disease because they all have the same fundamental 4 trigger factors. Okay. So Lisa's asking, she says, I haven't finished reading No Grain, No Pain, which is my best-selling book, but I would love if you can explain the benefits of fasting and why it's so beneficial. Well, Many of you listening have heard about leaky gut. Leaky gut is kind of a precursor, can be a precursor to autoimmunity. And so a lot of people are trying to figure out why they have a leaky gut or if they have a leaky gut. Well, leaky guts are caused in essence by damage to the GI tract. So where there's damage, we can develop intestinal permeability or leakages. And then those leakages over time can lead to a process called molecular mimicry that triggers autoimmunity. So that being said, what does fasting have to do with any of this? Well, the gut, just like any other organ or any other tissue, if it's overworked, if it's overabused, then it will break down quicker. Okay, think of it like exercise. If you exercise today and your muscles get really sore the next day, and then you exercise again and you exercise again and you exercise again, and you don't take adequate rest or break, what's going to happen to your muscles? They're going to go into a catabolic state of breakdown. They're not going to recover and they're not going to heal, and you're going to develop chronic pain as a result of overtraining. Think of that as it relates to your gut. A lot of advice that's out there is eat small meals throughout the course of the day. Eat every 2 hours, eat every hour. This is one of the old weight loss metabolism myths, is that if you eat 2 small meals every hour, you'll increase your metabolic rate and you'll have better success with weight loss. It's not true. What the benefit of fasting is, it gives your gut rest. Your gut needs rest too, just like your muscles need rest, just like every other organ in your body needs rest. And if we overwork our guts by either 1, eating foods we're allergic to, 2, having an overgrowth of yeast is a perfect example. A parasite would be a perfect example of the gut under attack. Or if we're eating too much food when we eat, if we're eating too frequently, if we're eating foods that are very hard to digest, dairy is very hard to digest, legumes can be very hard to digest. If we're doing these things on a regular basis, we don't give our gut a break, then our gut is over time going to wear down. And when it wears down, it has a greater potential to develop leaky gut. So that being the case, remember that fasting helps give your gut a break. The term breakfast is actually, if we break it down, it's break the fast, right? We're breaking the fast. And most people, if they go to bed at a reasonable hour, will at least sleep 8 hours. And there'll be a fast. There will be an 8-hour break for the gut, but the gut needs more time off than that, especially if the gut's damaged. So breaking the fast. So think about a fast as 12 hours or longer, ideally 16 hours is a really good, what we would call intermittent fast, where if you're taking a 16-hour break, so eat an early dinner, eat a late breakfast or brunch, and you'll have a 16-hour window where you're not eating. And then the other 8 hours you can spend eating. And you don't have to eat less calories. You just have to give an extended, prolonged period of time for your gut to heal, rest, recover, just like the rest of your body requires that. Okay. Another question coming in. Is it okay to take a defatted wheat germ supplement if you are gluten sensitive? Absolutely not. This question, Alexis, very good question. Thanks for asking it. We don't want anything with any type of grain. If you've been diagnosed as gluten sensitive, you do not want grain regardless. This question came up in a different way a few days ago with a patient. They were asking about a wheat and barley water that was being labeled as gluten-free. We've been asked about the green drinks, the drinks that contain green grasses like wheatgrass, barley grass, oat grass, ryegrass, etc., and being touted as superfoods. These are some of the worst things that you can do if you are actually gluten sensitive, because even though they could say they're gluten-free, they're technically not gluten-free. I have a very, very long video. It's 37 minutes long. If you go to glutenfreesociety.org, glutenfreesociety.org, there is in essence, I'm going to put up the website here for you, so you'll see it come across the chat. You'll see that website come across the chat under my name, glutenfreesociety.org. There's on the menu items, there's a item that says videos, and the very first video, which is gluten sensitivity, what is it? It's a video I'd encourage you to watch. It's about 37 minutes long, and what this video basically will help explain to you is why there's no such thing as gluten-free grain. Now, I know a lot of people out there don't agree with me on this, but from the scientific perspective, there is no such thing as a gluten-free grain. there is such thing as an alpha-gliadin-free grain. And remember, the FDA defines gluten as the protein alpha-gliadin. In this video, again, we don't have time in this. I want to get to more questions. Please go watch that video if you ever are questioning what is and what is not gluten-free. Because a lot of people think they're gluten-free and they're not gluten-free. And this is one of the biggest holdbacks to why they're not getting healthy or why they're not recovering. Okay. Question coming in from Tina. Can you go back to gluten after leaky gut is healed? How do you know when leaky gut is healed? Once diagnosed as gluten sensitive, is it forever? This is a great question. If you were accurately identified as gluten sensitive, meaning the only true way to know is to do genetic testing. Genetic testing tells you whether or not you have the genes that are gluten sensitive positive. These genes, if you have them, they don't change, right? So it's one of those areas where if you are genetically gluten sensitive and you eat gluten, then your body's normal response to gluten will be to create inflammation to try to protect you from it. So if you've been accurately diagnosed through genetic testing, no, you can never go back and eat gluten. I'm actually going to put in a link in the chat box for everyone to learn a little bit more about genetic testing. So if you go to that, if you follow that link in the chat box, you'll find that link there to learn a little bit more about genetic testing to get an accurate representation of whether or not you're gluten sensitive. Now, the other question is, how do you know if you have leaky gut? There is no great test for leaky gut. There are great gut tests that can tell us the different things that we know can cause leaky gut. But the problem is there are about 12 different known things that we have scientifically studied that can actually cause leaky gut. And so if you're doing that part right, and we don't have inflammation in the gut, and we don't have infection in the gut, and we have good digestive enzyme production in the gut, and we have good healthy bacterial diversity within the gut, then the gut is going to be a generally healthy organ. Now, some things that can also cause leaky gut, like vitamin and mineral deficiencies, these are the same kinds of things that can cause autoimmune triggers. Perfect examples: L-glutamine, vitamin A, zinc deficiency, vitamin B12 and folate deficiencies. All of these nutritional deficiencies can cause leaky gut. So going back to what I've talked about from the beginning of the autoimmune revolution, which is you can't piecemeal this stuff. You've got to go in and you've got to accurately assess all of these things simultaneously so that you can act on them simultaneously. That's the only way your body's going to be able to heal. Because if you've got, for example, maybe you have a leaky gut, but maybe there's 7 different reasons why you have that leaky gut, and you address 3 of those reasons, but not the other 4, you're not going to get better. If you address 5 of those reasons and not the other 2, you're not going to get better. You've got to be comprehensive in your approach. You've got to find somebody, if you're struggling to recover, even though you've done what you think is everything right in your diet and your lifestyle, and you're still struggling, you've got to get with a functional medicine practitioner who's well-versed in a comprehensive approach, like the approach that I've discussed with you during this summit. Suzanne's asking, why do some gluten-free expert doctors say to stay away from beans and lentils, and some say that they are okay? This is because, this goes back to what I was talking about with fasting. Fasting is important for many people because if your gut is damaged, or if your gut is tired and worn out, and you eat beans and lentils as a staple food, remember that beans and lentils, by definition, are seeds, okay? Seeds are hard to digest. And so if your gut's already broken and you're trying to put in a staple food that's extremely hard to digest, you're going to burden your gut further. It's not the same thing as allergy. We're just simply talking about beans and seeds or lentils can be a burden on a gut that's already broken. And if you're trying to recover your gut and you're eating a lot of those foods, you're not going to recover very effectively. So that's why many doctors will say that. Of course, there are other reasons like lectins, and there are other proteins in beans that can shut down your digestion, but those are, secondary reasons. Okay. Next question. Let's see here. If the IgG4 delayed food allergy test detected both avocado and eggs to be very high, is this caused from a leaky gut, and could this lead to an autoimmune problem? So first of all, I don't like IgG subtype 4 tests. They're not very accurate, and there's a lot of flaws and problems with these types of tests. If you're really going to do accurate allergy testing, there's IgG, there's IgA, there's IgM, there's IgD, there's immune complex, there's T cell responses. There's also IgE. So you've got 7 different ways the immune system can respond. If you're measuring one subfraction of those 7, you're not going to get a super accurate result. So I would find a doctor who understands that allergy testing needs to be comprehensive before I would trust the result of a single IgG subtype test. Now, can allergies be caused by leaky gut? Yes, they can, but there's 2 kinds of allergies. So to answer the fundamental of this question, there's what we would call true allergies, which is an allergy that you have that is probably not going to go away. It's a true allergy. A classic example of a true allergy is the anaphylactic reactions for a kid with peanut allergy, or for somebody with that shellfish allergy. They eat it, their lips blow up, their eyes swell shut, their throat constricts, and they're in the hospital, and there's a life-threatening scenario. Those are typically what we would deem as a true allergy. Now, then you have acquired allergies. Acquired allergies are typically delayed. The symptoms are not oftentimes as obvious. The symptoms can be subtle and can progressively get worse with time. These are delayed types of symptoms. And so these types oftentimes are acquired allergies, meaning they're caused as a result of a fundamental breakdown in the gut or in your immune system. It doesn't have to be a leaky gut. You could have a breakdown in your immune system that's creating this reaction. So it's kind of a misconception, a common myth, that leaky gut is the only thing that causes us to acquire new food allergies. Although it can, a fundamental breakdown in immune function can also cause allergies as well. It's good questions. Okay, particular suggestions for folks with Sjogren's other than gluten-free. This question from Julie Kolosinski. Thanks for the question, Julie. So answer to the question is there something in particular that somebody with Sjogren's disease should do beyond going gluten-free? Yes. Going back again, I know I'm being very redundant, but I think redundancy is very important, because I think you all need to understand that the name of the autoimmune disease that you have been diagnosed with is simply a name given by a doctor based on the symptoms that your body is expressing. And this is why I'm not a big fan of the labels, of the names. There are 100+ different forms of autoimmunity that doctors have classified, but they all have the same 4 origins: vitamin and mineral deficiencies, food allergies, sensitivities and intolerances, chemical reactions, and infectious agents. So if you investigate those 4 things, again, Sjogren's or not, whether you have Sjogren's, whether you have dermatomyositis, whether you have fibromyalgia, whether you have ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or celiac, those 4 things should be being investigated. Because if you're investigating those 4, then you'll have a comprehensive roadmap for how to overcome and recover. Now, again, this is where finding a really solid functional medicine doctor is going to come into play. Okay, do I feel like there is a connection between diet and personality disorders? I have a 16-year-old living with the disorder and would like to help improve the quality of her life. Thank you. This question from Sharon. Absolutely, there's a connection between diet and borderline personality disorder. Let's define what a drug is. So a drug is anything that's classified as an agent that makes us feel, think, or act differently. Okay, so change in our personality. Have you ever seen a child take in sugar for the first time? They're typically bouncing off the walls. Their behavior changes. A lot of children with food dye exposure, their behavior changes. So can we have food impacting or diet impacting our personalities? Absolutely, we can. And so it's very, very important. You've got somebody who's got this type of disorder, that number one of the quickest and easiest things to do is remove all dyes, remove all processed food additives from the diet. Because these things can act very, very strongly like drugs, like stimulants, and they can change behavior and change personality very rapidly. So remove those things first. And then again, get with somebody who's qualified to get into the details of whether or not there are other triggers in terms of that personality behavioral problem. Okay. Question coming from Laura. Laura from Canada. Please answer this question. I have read that if I pair a banana with a fat and a protein, that it will not spike my insulin. I love bananas and don't want to give them up. Is this true? Okay, so a lot of people give bananas a bad rap, and they give bananas a bad rap because of their higher glycemic load, because of their higher glycemic index, because they have a tendency to spike the blood sugar and then subsequently spike insulin. And this can be true. So timing can be important. I'm not a big fan of discouraging bananas. However, if you have a blood sugar problem and you're eating bananas, and you're not exercising, and you're eating other foods that are high in sugar as well, that also will spike your insulin, it can become a problem. But it's not the banana per se. It's probably has a lot more to do with the other lifestyle pieces. You don't necessarily have to mix carbs, fats, and proteins to reduce the insulin spike. As a matter of fact, some studies show that proteins are just as insulinogenic as carbohydrates, meaning that you could eat a protein shake and it can spike your insulin and blood sugar just as bad as eating a heavy carbohydrate load. So I would say don't worry about those mixes and matches to reduce your blood sugar. Worry about focusing on quantity. Are you over consuming foods that are higher in sugar? Does your body tolerate higher sugar? Do you currently have hypoglycemia or diabetes, which impacts the way your body handles sugar? And are you exercising? Do you have enough lean body mass or lean muscle mass to deal with the sugar that you are eating? Because some people are glucose intolerant or sugar intolerant or banana intolerant, not because they're banana intolerant, but because they're under muscled and they don't have the muscle tissue designed to deal with the quantity of sugar that they're consuming or eating. So all of these things play a role. All these things are important in this process. So you have to look at it as a whole. You can't just look at bananas and damn them and say, okay, all bananas are out because they're high sugar, or I can only eat bananas if I mix it with protein and fat to slow down the sugar rush. That's just not true, and studies show that is the case. Okay, next question from Lynn. I suffer from migraines and have vitiligo. Would going grain-free help? Is it possible to ever store, I think what the question means is say restore my pigment? Thank you. Okay, so yes and no. So, okay, migraines and vitiligo, both forms of autoimmune disease. Vitiligo is when it's the condition Michael Jackson had where his skin was bleaching. The follicles in the skin, or the pigment cells in the skin, actually are under autoimmune attack, and they quit producing pigment, and the skin starts to turn white. So I have seen cases in the clinic where we've gotten reversal of vitiligo, and I have seen cases where we didn't. And a lot of that depends on how aggressively advanced the disease is. So I've seen it. I've seen cases where we get patch repigmentation, and I've seen cases where that didn't happen. But with vitiligo, something else to consider, and with migraine, there is a connection, a nutritional correlation between the two, and that is with B vitamins. A lot of people with both of these conditions suffer with vitamin B12 deficiency, and so if you aren't aware, vitamin B12 is very, very important for producing ATP. And in the case of migraine headaches, it's a known trigger for migraine headaches. And when deficient, it's a known contributing factor in vitiligo. So I would highly, highly encourage you to have your levels of B12 checked, but not in your blood. Have it checked. There's a test called a homocysteine test, and there's another test called MMA, methylmalonic acid. And this test is a marker for vitamin B12 deficiency. If you have your doctor, also there's a complete blood count that can be run. A complete blood count is a pretty easy test to run. Any doctor can run it. And if your MCV value or if your MCH values are high, this can oftentimes mean a vitamin B12 deficiency. This is a form of what's called macrocytic anemia. And then another test is using a lymphocyte proliferation assay. This is probably one of the best ways to measure vitamin B12 deficiency. And you have to be careful. A lot of supplemental B12s are problematic in this sense that and I just posted a link to a gluten-free version of vitamin B12. If you want to try a vitamin B12 supplement, I recommend this one because a lot of them contain hidden corn. I actually had to formulate one for my clinic because I couldn't find one that didn't contain some type of corn additive or corn filler that would be a trigger for autoimmunity. So at any rate, B12 is oftentimes associated with vitiligo, oftentimes associated with migraine headache. Question on a topic we were talking about earlier from Tom. How does one fast if they're diabetic? Well, this is one of those things where, with diabetes, depending on the type of diabetes that you have, if you have type 1 diabetes and if you're on insulin shots or you're on an insulin pump, you have to be careful with fasting, because this is something that you have to regulate and you have to monitor your blood sugar. So fasting might not be the best bet for you to start. A lot of type 1 diabetics, when they go grain-free, their blood sugars are greatly, greatly improved and greatly better controlled. They need less insulin, less frequently and less often, and they control their blood sugar even better. I've seen this in patient after patient after patient. So I would first look at the diet changes before attempting to make those intermittent fasts to see if you could get better control over your blood sugar and over your insulin, and then get with the doctor who's prescribing that insulin and talk with them about your different options, because there are fast acting and medium and long acting forms of insulin, and those all play a role and should be considered before making any type of attempt at going on a fast. Okay, good questions. Is SIBO related to bile function? I heard they had studies on rats and it turned on and off by manipulating it. Okay, SIBO. I think that's what that's supposed to be. SBO, I'm going to assume. Maybe I shouldn't answer that question, because I'm not sure if Susan means SIBO or if she means SBO as some other different type of an acronym. SIBO stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it can be related to bile dysfunction, meaning if we're not properly producing bile, we're not properly removing toxins from the GI tract, and that can lead to some fermentation and some problems in your capacity and ability to digest. And that fermentation can cause certain types of species of bacteria to overgrow and get out of control, and then start creating a lot of gas and bloating and digestive problems. So yeah, there is a correlation there. One easy thing to do is if you suspect gallbladder problems, or if particularly if you've already had your gallbladder removed, you can't really do this. But one of the things that can be done is to take a good digestive enzyme supplement with ox bile in it as a source of bile if you've had your gallbladder removed, or if your gallbladder's not functioning well. Now, one of the other things that you can do is a gallbladder flush, but I'd recommend, before you just go that alone, get with a good functional medicine doctor to guide you through a gallbladder flush, because sometimes they can be a kind of a bear to handle, and they can knock you down and put you in bed for a week. So you really want to have somebody who's overseeing that process with you. Don't just try to go it alone. Do I recommend the healing diet, i.e. in this example, GAPS or AIP, autoimmune paleo, SCD or specific carbohydrate diet, etc., or is doing the 30-day no grain, no pain program sufficient? Well, so that's a great question, Lisa. I want you to understand that if you have an issue and you're trying a generalized diet, meaning that you're trying a program or a diet program that is not unique or specific for you, and all programs are, then your results may be stellar, they may be horrible, or they may be mediocre. Meaning that the diet may be right for you, it may be kind of right for you, or it may be completely the wrong diet for you, because all programs are generalizations of somebody's experiences working and dealing with people, right? So what is the no grain, no pain protocol based on? That protocol is based on working with people who have autoimmune problems. It's based on my 16 years of clinical experience and what I have found to be in most cases, very, very true. So that protocol and program should be sufficient for you. And if it's not, and this is the experience that people come back to us with, if they follow the no grain, no pain 30-day diet protocol, they're going to either have full recovery or they're going to have a very good recovery, but hit a plateau. And it's those plateaus that require working with somebody who understands functional medicine to break through, because generally there's a missing element. Because let me give you a perfect example. If you're allergic to blueberries, which is a safe food, no matter what diet you're following, whether it's SCD or whether it's GAPS or whether it's the no grain, no pain protocol, etc. But if you're allergic to blueberries, you won't heal. You'll hit a plateau, and it'll be a fork in the road for you. So getting specific types of testing done is going to be a plateau buster. And this is where a lot of people are. They're doing a lot of really good programs, and they do find improvement. They do find that they do get some better, but then they hit that plateau and then they don't know what to do. So they try another program. And the problem with moving from program to program to program is that you just go from one generalization to another generalization without ever getting specific. So you've got to get specific. At the end of the day, you've got to get super specific if you're still struggling after you've gone through a generic or a generalized program. Okay. Let's see here. We're going to pause for just 1 second. I want to just kind of get a feel for, I'm going to ask another poll here. How many of you have actually read No Grain, No Pain? This will kind of help me too, and I can reference areas of the book. And if you have read it, you can, and you have a copy, you can pull that book out and you can kind of go to those reference sections. And if you don't have it, you can take notes and you can get a copy and you can go back and reference it. And that way you'll have, after this webinar is over, you'll have something you can go back and can be very, very helpful for your notes and for your struggles if you're needing that type of help. While we're running this, I want to show you an example. Let's see here. So it looks like about 27% of you have read the book and maybe have the book, and 73% of you don't. Okay, so that's helpful for me to know. We'll come back in and I'll make some really good references for you and you can go back. But if you don't have it, I would highly encourage it, because if you're struggling and you didn't get a copy of that 2-hour presentation in the webinar, that autoimmune matrix, the book, chapter 10, is all about functional medicine, and it's all about what you need to be looking for, and it's where you can find functional medicine doctors. There's a whole chapter dedicated to functional medicine in the book for you for that reason, because I know, my clinic we're very busy. I still take on new patients, but we're really busy and it can be a challenge to get in. So I don't want people to struggle and not have some type of answer. Okay. So the next question I want to ask, let's fire away, is, did you watch the Autoimmune Recovery Matrix during the Autoimmune Revolution Summit? Because that also is going to help you a little bit better, get some feedback. Give you just a couple of seconds more to get that filled out here. While we're doing this, let's see here.
Good morning to you, and you become very well known in our area for helping a lot of people who have those weird symptoms nobody can figure out, and it seems to always be tied to some food sensitivity.
I had a journey of doctor visits trying to determine why I had eczema and digestive issues, and the doctors only had a solution of prescribing me steroids or cortisone cream, antidepressants, and allergy shots, of which I stayed on starting at my childhood throughout my adult life. And at the age of 50, I developed an autoimmune condition called polymyalgia that practically crippled me and was extremely painful. The eczema was the hardest to live with. It started early in my childhood, and I didn't know what caused the itching, and we tried to determine, was it food, was it environmental, was it a makeup that I would use? I became scared of living and became very anxious. I knew that it wasn't good to be on medications as much as I was, or my daughter was. And I knew they were harming me, but the doctors, there was no other answer. And the rheumatologist had assured me that if I was off of my prednisone, I would stiffen back up and be crippled. So there was no other solution. She felt that I needed to be on that for the rest of my life. And then that's when I found Dr. Osborne, who felt differently. When I came to him, the prednisone was working, but before that, I was practically crippled. I couldn't even lift my arms over my head or turn.
Okay, so just again, just an example of a really powerful story of using the right functional medicine type of approach, and someone who, many of you may have gone from doctor to doctor suffering with problems and not really been able to find a resolution. Tried a lot of programs, but you're still hitting that brick wall. Again, a perfect example of how finding and identifying those hidden factors can make all the difference in the world in recovery. Okay, so let's get back to some more questions here. This is coming in on the chat. It's a question about IC, interstitial cystitis. Is there anything in particular that can be done for interstitial cystitis? I want to be very clear on some things with this, because this is an autoimmune condition, but IC, gluten grain-free, has to be definitely part of this equation. If you have IC and you're not grain-free, you're always going to struggle. The other component that I have seen be the case for cases of IC is a chronic recurring infection in the bladder lining or in the kidneys. And this is one of those times where infection can play a role. Remember, we said the 4 categorical reasons autoimmune disease occurs. Infection is one of those 4. And so a lot of times the doctors won't rule this out, or they won't treat this, or they won't get this under control. So with IC, a lot of times infection is a major, major factor. So keep that piece in mind. Okay, question coming in from Leah. What to do about gadolinium contrast material used in brain MRIs? One of the things that you should absolutely do if you have to have an image where they're using a major heavy contrast like a gadolinium, you want to do a post-chelative process. But if you're struggling with autoimmune disease and your gut is damaged and you try to use like supplemental chelation, it's going to make your problem even worse. So the very first thing that has to be done, and this will answer another question that came in, is there an order to things? If I have a heavy metal issue burden plus I have a leaky gut, should I address the leaky gut before I try to address the heavy metals? And the answer to that is yes. You should address the leaky gut. You should definitely address the leaky gut first. And so having gut function tests and making sure the gut is clean and taken care of before you attempt any type of oral chelation or IV chelation is going to be very important. But good oral chelators, natural oral chelators, I have a formulation called Chelamax. CHELEMAX. That particular chelating agent is available on Gluten Free Society. If you go to Gluten Free Society and check out the shop button there, or type in Chelemax in the search box, you'll be able to find that. It's a great safe, natural, mild chelating agent that can have very, very strong and very, very good effects against heavy metal. Good question. Can I list the most common testing required for autoimmune disease, e.g. RA, ankylosing spondylitis? Well, that's a bear of a question. The most common testing required as whose requirement? So like if you're asking me what my requirements would be if somebody came into my clinic versus what a rheumatologist might order, they're not going to be the same tests. The rheumatologist is typically going to order a general chemistry, a CBC, complete blood count. They're typically going to order C-reactive protein to kind of monitor inflammation. They might run something called ESR, erythrocyte sedimentation rate. They might also run some protein factors, albumin factors, and they might run some immune factors to measure how your immune system is functioning, or if it's too strong, or if it's too weak. But if I've got somebody coming in my office and they're complaining of a prior diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis or AS, ankylosing spondylitis, and we'll just throw in there uveitis, because that question came in earlier. Uveitis is a part of the family of this disease. Psoriatic arthritis. We'll also throw in reactive arthritis and scleroderma and dermatomyositis. These are all part of the same family of arthritic autoimmune diseases. The absolute mandatory testing, the minimum amount of testing that I would do is, number one, I would do testing on the gut, comprehensive gastrointestinal evaluation. And I would absolutely make sure there wasn't some type of bacterial leakage, because it's very common in autoimmune arthritis for Klebsiella, which is a type of bacteria, and Pseudomonas, which is another type of bacteria, to cause an immune system response to our own cartilage. It's extremely common. Lyme is another infectious organism, microorganism, or bacteria that can trigger or mimic these types of autoimmune pain syndromes. So you've got to check the gut. You've got to rule out any type of bacterial abnormalities that are present. You've got to rule out infection. And so there are a lot of different tests for this. But for Lyme, Western blot is one of the tests that are commonly ordered. But the problem with Western blot is if you don't have acute Lyme disease, it will show up negative. If you have chronic Lyme disease, or if you have Lyme disease hiding under a biofilm, it will not pick up on that type of Western blot test. So you have to run what's called a cytokine profile for Lyme. And so there are a number of different labs that are out there that will run cytokine testing premises for Lyme disease. So again, get with a functional medicine doctor who understands that. In addition, I would also look at vitamin D, 25-OHD levels. I'd run a full battery of lymphocyte proliferation to measure all the B vitamins, calcium, selenium, zinc, chromium, magnesium, etc. I would also do a full battery to rule out delayed food, as well as acute food responses. So again, I spoke earlier on this event about the 7 different reasons why we can have these kinds of responses. And so I would measure all 7 as a starting point. I would rule out heavy metal toxicity, because it's also a known trigger in autoimmune arthritis. So particularly what I see, at least in my clinic, and have seen a number of times, is lead. Lead displaces calcium, and calcium is necessary for strong collagen and cartilage. And so when we have lead displacing calcium, we're going to have an easier time eroding the joints and creating joints and cartilage tissue that's not strong. So it's more prone to breaking down, and it's more prone to destruction. Additionally, we would be looking at, and these types of cases with autoimmune arthritis, we would absolutely be ruling out if there was a neuropathy component to the arthritis, meaning if there was also like numbness, tingling, or nerve pain, we'd be ruling out exposure to mold. Mold is a very, very common problem in my hometown, in my neck of the woods, which is just outside of Houston in Sugar Land, Texas. Because of the humidity factor here. Mold if you live in Louisiana, if you live upstate New York, where the summers are very humid, there are a lot of different, if you live in an older home where there's been water damage, there are a lot of different times where we consider mold to be a contributing factor in this. So running the right testing for mold, great place to check your home for mold is, and you can do this online, it's super easy, is a company called Mycometrics, Mycometrics, mycometrics.com. You can order a test called an ERMI test. ERMI. Just order the comprehensive one, and that will take care of that for you. Okay. Let's see here. So Michelle is asking, can I give a daily routine that incorporates what we need to do to address infection, deficiencies, toxins, allergies to combat autoimmune conditions? Michelle, the best daily routine I can give you is really spelled out well and no grain, no pain. Not only is there a daily routine, but there's a 7-day kind of protocol with meal plans, and then there's also a 30-day kind of protocol to do to dial in exactly what you need to be doing, to include what I call the 7 fundamental things that every person should do if they're trying to recover from chronic illness. And these are all lifestyle changes. Number 1, you want to have adequate diet. An adequate diet means you want to have the right diet for you. And that's where specialized types of testing can be infinitely helpful. Number 2, you want to have adequate sleep. Number 3, adequate sunshine without the use of sunscreen. Number 4, you want to have clean air and clean water is number 5. Number 6 is exercise to tolerance. And we spent a lot of time. I spent time talking with Dan Ritchie and Mark Sisson and Jesse Canone about exercise to tolerance and about what you can do if you're in a lot of pain and it's hard to exercise. And then the last fundamental piece is we want to have stress management. We want to have stress control in our life. So if you're applying those 7 fundamental rules consistently, that's what you do in your daily life beyond getting ultra specific based on you as a unique person, as a unique individual. Question coming in, another question. Tammy's asking, what's a good level for homocysteine? We want your homocysteine under 9, preferably around 7. If it's over 9, you're over. So homocysteine, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a metabolic byproduct. We all make it. Everybody makes homocysteine, but we convert homocysteine into another compound called methionine or into another compound called glutathione. Now, many of you have heard of glutathione. It's basically what the liver uses to detoxify. So we like homocysteine. We just don't want it building up to too high of an amount, because that would mean we're not converting it into glutathione or methionine. Now we need methionine is an amino acid. We need it to build new DNA, new RNA, and to heal, to make new protein structures. So again, if we get stuck at homocysteine, then we're not making adequate building blocks to heal and repair, and we're not making adequate detoxification proteins to adequately detoxify. So homocysteine levels under 9, around 7 are ideal. If you're having that level tested, if your doctor's testing that's kind of your goal. Okay. Let's see here. So Elise is asking for if there's occasional non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug use, so like ibuprofen, aspirin, Celebrex, Mobic, naproxen. Is there any way to mitigate the negative effects that non-steroidal anti-inflammatories have on the gut lining? No. Yes, and yes, but no. So like, why does the label say do not take this on an empty stomach? Because if you take it on an empty stomach, it'll rip a hole in your gut mucosa. If you eat it with food, it will kind of mitigate that, but not to the degree where there's no damage. Even baby aspirin doses as low as 7.5 milligrams. So think of that. A baby aspirin is typically around 85 milligrams. 7.5 milligrams of aspirin has been shown to cause gastric bleeding. So it doesn't take much, even on a stomach full of food, even if it's gastrically or enterically coated aspirin, it's still going to create damage. Now, some people will use marshmallow root or licorice. I actually have a product designed for coating the GI tract. It's called GI Shield. If you're interested in that, it's got a lot of different coating agents for the GI tract that can be helpful. You can find that on the shopping center or tab on glutenfreesociety.org. It's called GI Shield. But that's something that can be done. My advice would be to try to find out why you're having to use NSAIDs and get away from it as quickly as possible. But if you're absolutely there and you need something to somewhat mitigate that, use GI Shield. Can I talk about high cortisol from a high carb diet? Yeah, high carb diets cause high cortisol if your body is carb intolerant. So what that means is if your body doesn't process carbs very effectively, and there's a lot of reasons why that can happen. Nutritional deficiency is a big one. If you have a chromium deficiency, for example, or magnesium or zinc deficiency, you're not going to process carbohydrates well. You're not going to take the sugar from your blood and get it into your cells and be able to convert it into energy. And then what will happen as a subsequent to that is you'll have high carbohydrate, high sugar, glucose floating around in your bloodstream. That's going to trigger inflammation. And that's going to trigger a cortisol release. Cortisol is going to go up to try to fight the inflammation for you. So high carbohydrate diets, if your body is not conducive to a high carb diet, it's going to cause elevations in cortisol, and elevations in cortisol acutely are not a big deal. An acute elevation in cortisol, meaning you were injured, you made more cortisol to fight the inflammation, but then your body went into heal and repair mode. There's a process of inflammation where this is a normal part of that process. But if it's chronically elevations in blood sugar, meaning if you're always elevated, if it's always there, like in prediabetes or people that don't tolerate carbohydrates very well, then your cortisol is chronically elevated. That over time is going to lead to weight gain. It's going to lead to water retention. It's going to lead to muscle loss because cortisol is a catabolic hormone that breaks down muscle tissue. And so what will end up happening, and I actually call this the gluten muscle wasting cycle, because gluten containing diets are typically very high carbohydrate, and they create this cycle of elevations of cortisol, which lead to wasting of the muscle, fat storage, because when the muscle is deteriorated, your metabolism goes down, your metabolism slows down. And even though you might be eating the same exact quantity of calories, your muscle is what burns those calories. So as your muscle deteriorates, those calories start to pack on as fat. And then that can set the stage for leptin resistance and diabetes and a host of other problems like metabolic syndrome, and your blood sugar can go up. And now you've got a whole mess on your hands. So that's kind of the gist. And again, it's not that carbohydrates are bad or evil. I want to be clear there too. Many people consume carbohydrates, and in that consumption of carbohydrates, it's the right move for them. But many people overconsume carbohydrates. So going back to balance, it's about balance. And for some people, it's about avoiding carbohydrates, maybe even potentially going on a ketogenic diet for a time, because they've been eating so many carbohydrates in such high amounts for so long, they have to go in the opposite direction to allow their body to make a recovery. Lisa's asking how I feel about muscle testing for diagnosis. It's a good question, Lisa. I'm not a big fan. And that's not to say that a lot of doctors won't and don't use it and don't get good results. I'm not a big fan of it for several reasons. I'm very objective in the way I like to look at testing. And with muscle testing, there's a lot of variables that can interfere with the muscle testing result. Let me give you some examples. As the doctor, let's say I worked out this morning, and this morning I worked my shoulders out. And my shoulders are really gassed and really tired. And now I'm going to go in and see patients today. And I'm going to use my shoulders and my arms and my muscles to do muscle testing. And so my shoulders are tired, and that's a variable today that makes it different than it was yesterday. Let's say that another variable, let's say my patient worked out their shoulders this morning, and so their shoulders are tired. Let's say that there's another patient in my office wearing a perfume that the patient I'm doing muscle testing on is allergic to. And so as I'm doing my muscle testing, I get a false result because of the perfume that's in the air. Let's say that there's there is an article of clothing that patient's wearing that contains a dye that they're allergic to. And when I do the muscle testing on them that day, it's different than what it would be on another day where they weren't wearing that shirt with the same dye in it. So again, there's just a lot of variation and a lot of ability for high variability in muscle testing. And that's why I don't prefer to use it as a gold standard, because it can change from day to day. I actually trained in graduate school. I actually trained in applied kinesiology with the doctor who actually created applied kinesiology, which is what muscle testing is. So it's not that I'm not familiar with it. It's just that I didn't see that other doctors were getting consistent enough results. I certainly wasn't getting consistent results without that variability, which is why I'm a much bigger fan of testing without guessing and using technology to the best of our advantage in doing lab testing. Okay, good question. Histamine intolerance. Wendy's asking about histamine intolerance. So histamine intolerance is generally as a result of a broken gut. In essence, most people don't just have a histamine intolerance. They have a gut that's been abused and destroyed for years, and there are specialized types of enzymes that are released by gut cells that help us to degrade histamine. And so a gut that's histamine intolerant is generally a gut that needs to be healed. And once it's healed, histamine intolerance goes away. In other words, the patient can start to become tolerant of consuming histamines again. So it's very, very important to understand that histamine intolerance is a side effect of a broken gut and not this genetic problem that you have. Because what will happen to a lot of people that have been told that is they're already on a gluten-free diet, then they're getting on a low histamine diet. Now they're adding in a specific carbohydrate diet and a GAPS diet, and their diet becomes so uber restrictive that they can't eat. And then when they're not eating, they can't get nourished. So don't fall down that pitfall of adding multiple types of diets to your repertoire without getting specific. Okay. Ellen is asking, what could be the reason for reacting adversely to minerals, vitamins, hormones that the body needs, or reacting in an opposite fashion to different medications? Well, one of the biggest reasons that I see is cross-contamination. A recent study found just on gluten alone that 24 to 25% of supplements on the market are actually cross-contaminated with gluten. It's one of the reasons why I even offer products to people, because we have a very, very rigid and strict criteria in our manufacturing facility for maintaining purity and gluten-free status. Same thing can be said for the hormones. I mean, the more common example is Synthroid. Synthroid contains grain derivative, and that is oftentimes the reason why people with thyroid disease don't overcome it, because they are gluten sensitive, and the way they're treating the disease is by taking a drug that continues the gluten battering, so they never actually can recover. Okay, good question. Another one coming in. What supplements do I recommend for someone weaning off of NSAIDs or trying to wean off of NSAIDs? On that note, I'm going to pull something up for you guys. You'll see this. It's a webinar bonus, and so on that note, this question is: what do we do for somebody trying to make that wean? This is what we do right here. This is and a lot of this is I talk about in my book, in the supplement chapter in my book, what supplements are effective for helping to modulate inflammation and to help normalize inflammation. It's this grouping right here. And right now that we're just for this webinar, so this will go away. Well, actually, this will go away Sunday night at midnight. So if you really want to take advantage of what I would recommend and save 25%, pick up this bundle, pick up the autoimmune bundle. This bundle is it's got the 6 products that I would recommend, again, to regulate inflammation. It regulates inflammation through the gut. It regulates inflammation through the liver. It regulates inflammation through SPMs. This SPM product that we use is actually, it's called a specialized pro-resolving mediator. It's extremely effective at resolving chronic inflammation of a long-standing nature. And also Omega Heal. Now, anybody who picks up this bundle is also going to get, in their receipt, they're going to get the replay of the 2.5-hour autoimmune matrix that I did for the autoimmune summit, for the autoimmune revolution summit. So you'll get the replay of that. You'll get the link to the replay of that webinar, but you'll also get a special 4-page in detail, the doses that you should be using, how much, when to take it, how to take it, and also the lifestyle factors that you want to make sure that you're implementing while you're using these supplements to get the most out of it. So to answer your question, these are the supplements that I recommend, because in my experience, again, I've been doing this for 16 years in the clinic. This is my experience in the clinic. I don't make recommendations if it's not something that I've had a lot of experience directly with working with my patients with. Okay. Another question coming through: how do I find a good functional doctor in my area, Vancouver, British Columbia? Well, one of the places that I would encourage you to go to, I actually have a training platform for doctors as it pertains to gluten sensitivity. And so we have a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 level for physician training. And those of you who may be listening who are doctors or healthcare providers and you want to look into that training, if you'll go to glutenfreesociety.org, there's a menu item that says GF Doctors. Click on that item and you'll see our courses that we have. But for those of you looking for somebody who I can recommend, it's very hard to recommend doctors because not everybody sees eye to eye with me in the way that I view gluten. And so I'm very, very leery about making a recommendation because I don't want to send somebody to somebody else who's telling them that it's okay to eat corn and rice and sorghum and quinoa while I'm trying to tell them that it's not okay. Because with autoimmune disease, if you have an autoimmune condition and you're still eating those foods, you will never recover. I've never seen it happen. I've never seen somebody be able to recover without elimination of grain. So I just don't want to send you to somebody who doesn't understand that message and why. So I have a training program. It's a 10-hour certification program. It's postgraduate, and the best place to find those doctors is on glutenfreesociety.org. If you go to that, again, that same link, it says GF Doctors, and there's a scroll down menu, and it will say in that scroll down menu, find a doctor, find a clinic. And so if you click on that, a map will appear, and there will be a map of a lot of different practitioners. Now, some of these practitioners are in that database and have not gone through our training. They will basically be pointed out. In essence, we have icons and emblems that show which one of those practitioners have actually met our rigid criteria for training and have come through my 10-hour coursework. So again, if you're looking for somebody who has the type of knowledge and expertise and skill set that I feel confident and comfortable with vouching for, that's where I would send you to look, is to that website. Okay. Let's pull up the next question. Frank's asking what I use as a thickener in cooking if you can't use grain products. This is a great question. Actually, we just wrote a big article. I did a great interview with another practitioner on thickening agents, which ones to use and which ones not to use. But I'll go through it. So if you can search that for that article again on Gluten Free Society, but I'm going to go through a couple for you while we're on the webinar. Arrowroot can be used, and it's probably one of the better thickening agents. Tapioca can also be used, but if you have blood sugar problems, don't use it too aggressively or too much. It can elevate your blood sugar. Cassava flour can be used. It's also a pretty good thickening agent. So those are probably the three of my favorite. Now, some people will say, what about potato flour? Yeah, it can be used as a thickening agent. But again, if it's very high glycemic. So again, if you're using that in all of your cooking and you have blood sugar problems, it can lead to a problem in that light. So you just have to be careful with dose and quantity. What do I recommend for constipation due to hypothyroid? Gets worse when grains are removed from the diet. Well, it gets worse when the grains are removed from the diet. So Amy, the answer to that question is you really have to dial in what's going on in your GI tract, because if you're removing grains, one of the things that happens when you remove grains is if you don't replace it with other types of fiber, yeah, you can get constipated. I mean, there are the fundamental kind of no-brainer things that everybody has probably heard, like how do you alleviate constipation? Make sure you're drinking enough water, make sure you're getting 25 grams or more fiber every day. And that fiber doesn't have to come from whole grain. It can come from other vegetables or other fruits and other foods. So beyond those kind of very basic things, one of the more common things I see is a person with a hypothyroid. The reason they have constipation is because they still have hypothyroid, meaning that the thyroid is setting the metabolic rate for the muscles in the body. The thyroid actually regulates how well the muscles will contract and relax. And so people that with hypothyroid tend to have a lot of muscle problems. Remember that the gut is a muscle. It's a long muscular tube that runs through your body. So if you have a hypothyroid, your gut is probably going to have muscle spasms in it, and your peristaltic movement, in other words, the movement of your GI tract, is going to be compromised as a result of the hypothyroid. So you really have to get to the root of the hypothyroidism, as opposed to trying to medicate the thyroid, but not getting to the root. And some people are on medication and they're trying to get to the root, and the medication is being used as a Band-Aid, but the medication has gluten in it. So again, you can see the catch-22 in that scenario is that they never get better, because the medicine that's the Band-Aid actually is the thing that's keeping grain in their diet, which is perpetuating the problem. But they also have a problem with constipation because they took the bulk of the grain fiber out of their diet, and the medicine doesn't fix that part of it. So they end up getting kind of stuck in this vicious cycle of bowel dysfunction. Got to get with a good functional medicine doctor, get a good gut evaluation going so that you can identify where that issue is coming from and address it accordingly. One of the things, Natalie, if you're not doing, or Amy rather, if you're not doing this, is a good solid probiotic. If you take advantage of that immune bundle or that autoimmune bundle that I put together for you on this webinar, that probiotic in there, 2 of those a day, is extremely effective. It's a very high dose probiotic that is very, very effective. And one of the more common things we hear our patients say is, I could have a normal bowel movement for the first time in my life is while I'm taking that probiotic. So that's just another tool, another element that you can use. Okay. What gluten-free Synthroid do I recommend? I don't. I recommend finding out why you need to be on the Synthroid in the first place. Now, if you've had your thyroid removed, that in and of itself is a different animal, and that's a different conversation. But if you're on a Synthroid, you can get it compounded. So ask your doctor to compound you a version without the grain-based fillers. That's one alternative. But then there are other alternative medications that can be used that have no grain fillers in them also. WP thyroid is one of them, as well as Tyrosint, which is another type of thyroid medication that doesn't have the grain fillers. So you've got some options. It's the best thing to do is get with your doc and go through the inactive ingredient list with your doc. Make sure that you're not getting any of those fillers, because that's where you're going to run into the trouble. Okay, let's see here. Is there a connection between severe hypogammaglobulinemia and celiac disease? I have monthly IgG infusions, recently diagnosed with celiac, am strictly grain-free and having remarkable improvements. Oh, I don't doubt it, Maggie. That makes perfect sense to me. Is there a connection? Absolutely yes. One of the things that we do in patients that have, and we actually do a lot of testing that helps us to identify problems in antibody production, like IgG antibody problems and IgA antibody problems, is we use a serum-derived IgG powdered concentrate that can be taken as a shake, in a smoothie, and it's extremely effective in those types of people who are struggling. We call them refractory patients oftentimes, because they've gone grain-free but don't get better because their immune systems have been so destroyed from the years of damage that they absolutely need something to help them recover. And IgG infusions is one way to help. It can be very effective, but it's also extremely expensive, and a lot of people can't afford it. So serum-derived powdered formulas are very cost affordable and work extremely well. We've got a couple of different options on Gluten-Free Society. We've got something called Ultra-Immune IgG. We have a colostrum version, we have a serum version, and we have an immunized egg version, depending on what your allergies are. So you can check those out on glutenfreesociety.org in the shop category. Okay. Elise is asking if I see any correlation between autoimmune symptoms and hormonal fluctuation over the course of the menstrual cycle in women. And the answer is absolutely yes. They're actually PCOS, which is a form of autoimmune disease that can affect the menstrual cycle. Polycystic ovarian syndrome is a perfect and classic example of this. We also see women with amenorrhea, meaning they stop having periods. We see women with dysmenorrhea, meaning they have abnormal periods as a result of autoimmune reactions on their uterus and ovaries as well as in estrogen and progesterone receptors and receptor binding sites. So it's very, very common to see these types of problems and correlate it back to an autoimmune response. Thyroid autoimmune disease will influence the way women produce estrogen and progesterone. Adrenal output and the adrenal hormone autoimmune disease will affect this as well. So that, yes, to answer your question, yes, there's definitely a correlation there. Question coming in: how long should we be taking your autoimmune protocol supplements before phasing out the NSAIDs? It's a good question. And so a big part of that just depends on the level of your pain and where you're at in your diet and where you're at with the other fundamentals. So if you follow that autoimmune supplement protocol, you'll get that 4-page instruction sheet on what you should be doing in your lifestyle as well. It's very important that you implement all of those things. Don't just implement the supplementation, implement all of those things. Because within about 30 days, you're going to notice very, very profound improvements and very profound results. And so once you start seeing the pain reduction naturally, now is the time to get depending on whether you're taking over-the-counter prescriptive drugs. If you're taking over-the-counter, now's the time to start weaning. If you're taking prescriptive medications, now's the time to have that conversation with your prescribing doctor about how to go about that weaning process. But within 30 days, it's very, very possible and very, very typical of what I see in the clinic. Okay. What are the thoughts about the caffeine in tea being an irritant to the gut? Is it better to use decaffeinated green teas? Yes, if the gut is damaged and there are a lot of gut issues, gut problems, I encourage a complete discontinuance of all forms of caffeine for at least 6 months. And that includes green tea, that includes black teas, that includes coffee, that includes supplements that are like energy drinks or supplement products that contain caffeine, like guarana extract. There are a lot of energy products, even under the guise of health products, that contain sources of caffeine that you could skip, you could miss. It's easy to miss them in the ingredients. So you've got to go back and got to make sure that those are out, because caffeine is a gastric irritant and it's not going to help your process of recovery. Okay, let's see here. So my body is going numb, fingers shriveling, etc. Why can I feel feet hardening within minutes of eating a fruit salad or vegetable salad? Randall, I don't know. That's a good question. Without doing a physical examination and a neurological examination on you and actually getting to meet you face to face in person where we could have a much deeper conversation, I can't answer the why as to why that's happening. I could certainly theorize. Oftentimes people with severe yeast overgrowths, when eating particular types of fruit and even certain vegetables that are higher glycemic, can have a massive byproduct production of fermentation byproduct, and that in and of itself can create or can contribute to neuropathy-like symptoms. But I mean, another area there would be, it's just very possible you're allergic to those things that you're eating, or some of the things in the fruit and vegetable salad that you're eating, and that's triggering an immune response. It's leading to neurological damage. It's causing that symptom for you to happen. So again, I'm just theorizing here. I'm just kind of talking out loud off the cuff. I can't answer that question because it's too complex. What about the nightshade veggies and pain? Yeah, so nightshades. So one of the things that a test, this is a good question, Debbie. One of the tests that I would highly encourage you to have run, if you are wondering about whether nightshade removal is the right move for you, is a test called HLA-B27. This is a traditional blood test. It's a genetic marker. If you are HLA-B27 positive, you should be not eating nightshades. HLA-B27 positive gene patterns generally tend to react in a painful manner to nightshades. But the other thing is to test for the nightshades. Testing for nightshades through the immune system responses, in essence, doing those, again, IgE, IgA, IgM, IgD, IgG, immune complex T cell response testing to test for nightshade reactivity. So both of those things would be important to rule that piece out. Lori's asking, she says, I was tested by the Cyrex lab and negative on gluten intolerance. If you are suspecting autoimmune, what is the next step? Well, first of all, if you were tested through Cyrex as gluten intolerant, Cyrex can lead to false negative result. And it's not that it always does, but remember what Cyrex measures. There are over 1,000 forms of gluten. Cyrex measures about 14 of them. And typically Cyrex is measuring IgG, IgA, and IgM, and not IgE, and not immune complexes, and not T cell responses. So you can get a false negative on a Cyrex lab test. This is what I was talking about earlier. If you're going to measure for gluten sensitivity accurately, you've got to do it genetically. If you run a lab test, there's a lot of reasons why a lab test can come back negative. One, many of you have already read the book. You've already gone grain-free. So you go get a lab test, and your lab test is going to show up negative because you're not eating the grain. Two, many of you are immunosuppressed, meaning your IgA or IgG levels are suppressed. So you're running a test that measures IgG and IgA, and the test result is coming back as not elevated, not because you're not allergic, but because your immune system is suppressed. You can have, so that's three. You're not testing for all the different forms of gluten. You're testing for a handful. Four, it might be that it isn't the gluten at all, but it's the grain and it's the other elements within grain that are your problem. And this is, again, gluten oftentimes gets incriminated sometimes a little too quickly. Gluten, that's why I like to rule it in or out and be definitive about it. Because some people react, grains have a lot of molds in them. So you've got grain that contains mold, you got grain that contains heavy doses of pesticide, you got grain that contains heavy levels of arsenic and cadmium and mercury. You've got grain that contains proteins called ATIs, which can shut down your immune system and shut down your gut. You know, these are other non-gluten reasons why grain can be detrimental. So Cyrex is not going to pick up on those things. So if you've had a Cyrex done and you've been told continue to eat grain because the Cyrex was negative, that may be the wrong advice for you. Again, genetic testing if you want to know about gluten. It's the only way to get an accurate assessment about gluten. If you're doing it any other way, you're going to have a high degree to pick up false negative test results. Does 23andMe offer the genetic testing that I recommend? No. The only lab in the world that I know that offers the genetic testing that will accurately pick up all of the genes and all of the gene variants for gluten sensitivity is through Gluten-Free Society. 23andMe, understand 23andMe is a platform where they measure for something called genetic SNPs. Now, those of you who don't know much about genetics, a genetic SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism. It's a variant. This type of platform is really inexpensive and can be tested, and you can test a lot of different genes, but you can only detect variation in the gene. You can't actually detect the actual gene allele that you have. And that's where gluten sensitivity testing is very important. You have to be able to detect the different alleles that you have. 23andMe does not offer that type of platform in their testing. It has to be done. This type of testing has to be done very specifically through something called PCR. So the only place in the world I know to get that done is through Gluten-Free Society. We measure all of the different genes, all of the different genetic allelic variants that are gluten-sensitive variants. So I put that link up earlier in the chat box. It's still in there. If you want to go learn more about genetic testing, I encourage you to click on that link and go learn more about it. Okay. Let's see, there was a question that came through. Can I please address alopecia before I end this? So alopecia, depending on the kind of alopecia, for those of you who don't know, is hair loss. And there are different forms of autoimmune alopecia. There's alopecia areata, which is a very, very common one. There's alopecia universalis, which is total body hair loss. But the most common one is alopecia areata, which is patch-like hair loss on the head. And I've seen this in a number of patients. Full regrowth if we figure out what's creating it. This is not a hard thing to address or deal with. I've seen full regrowth and women who are half bald over autoimmune reactions to alopecia. You have to rule out nutritional deficiencies, chemical responses, you have to rule out infections, and you have to rule out food allergies and intolerances. It's the only way you're going to solve the riddle of alopecia. And I know I've said that a lot of times today, and I've been redundant, but I'm being redundant on purpose because I want that message in your brain. You've got to not piecemeal this thing. You've got to go get that information if you want to have a meaningful response. Susan's asking if Prometheus Labs shows the allele. No, they do not. Prometheus Labs shows the allele only if you're positive DQ2, DQ8. And without getting into all the scenarios, of the different variances and genotypes, DQ2s and 8s are only associated with celiac disease. There are other gene alleles that are associated with something called non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and Prometheus does not show that detailed information. It's why I don't recommend them. If they did that, I would just recommend them, but they don't do that. We actually had to set this up in the lab. So that they would test it appropriately. We've been doing it now for about 10 years. And again, to my knowledge, we're the only lab in the world that actually offers the full comprehensive genetic allelic testing for this issue. Okay. Sarah is asking, is the 25% off built into the price? Yes, there's no coupon code. That is 25% built off into the price. Again, that autoimmune bundle that we published, that we put up, it should be right there on your screen. That includes all 6 of those products. It includes the 2 hour and I think it's 2 hours and 12-minute presentation of the Autoimmune Revolution Matrix that we did during the summit, and it also includes a 4-page guide on the dosing, how to take these products, as well as lifestyle changes that you need to start implementing right away when you start these products. Again, that bonus will go away. It will go away on Sunday at midnight, so you have until then to pick it up, because we're actually barely breaking even at 25% off. Some of these products are extremely, extremely expensive to manufacture. And again, we're just trying to do this as a bonus ad for those of you who have taken time to come and learn more, because I like to reward positive learning behavior. Okay. Next question. So Marion, I answered this question earlier on what tests do we need to order to rule out all 4 causes of autoimmune disease. That is in detail. I detailed that out in the Autoimmune Revolution Health Matrix. It's that 2-hour presentation, and we map that out in very, very specific detail. Okay, next question. Are there studies that show some people don't convert T4 to T3? I want to raise this with the New Zealand equivalent of the FDA Pharmac. They only subsidize L-Troxin, which also includes gluten. I also don't convert T4 to T3 very well, and I'm now on whole thyroid. Look, the biggest issue with conversion problems has to do with a couple of nutrients. I actually posted this on our Facebook group today. Those of you who aren't on my Facebook group, I want to do something here very quickly. I'm going to put a link up for you on our Facebook group, because I just posted this, and if you go there, you can pull the information. But it's probably one of the most comprehensive articles that has ever been done on thyroid and nutrition. And so I'm going to post a link up to you. Sorry, I'm just pulling this link here, and I'm going to throw that in the chat box. So that those of you going, you should see it. Go sign up. Go like our Facebook group, and you'll see. Scroll down a couple. There's a new post that we put up today on thyroid nutritional reasons, or the hidden reasons why thyroid problems exist. And Frank, this answers your question about T4 to T3 conversion. The biggest problem that we see, and that has been studied, is actually has to do with an enzyme called it's an iodinase enzyme. It's where we take one iodine away from T4 to convert it into T3, and this is typically done in the peripheral tissues, in the muscle, and in the liver. So people with liver damage tend to have poor conversion. People with muscle damage and mitochondrial dysfunction can tend to have poor conversion. But this conversion requires an enzyme, and that enzyme requires selenium. Selenium is an essential mineral. It's a mineral, so you can test for selenium deficiency. Most doctors I know don't test for it. Now, on a thyroid test, you can run a test called a reverse T3, which is an indirect marker for selenium deficiency, but you can also do lymphocyte proliferation on selenium, and you can get an idea for whether or not the person is storing adequate quantities of selenium in their cells in order for them to properly be able to convert T4 to T3. This is very, very critical, because I see a lot of people struggling to overcome thyroid problems who don't address this nutritional conversion issue. Now, iron is also important for this conversion, and so with iron deficiency can cause all the symptoms that low thyroid can cause. It can cause shortness of breath and fatigue and muscle pain and muscle weakness. It can cause constipation. It can cause low libido. It can cause hair loss. So a lot of people with thyroid problems actually have iron deficiency, and I've seen cases where you correct the iron deficiency, you can actually correct the thyroid problem. Not all the time, but there are cases. So having your iron levels checked, and that means running a CBC, a complete blood count with differential, where you're looking at hemoglobin, hematocrit, you're looking at red blood cell count, you're looking at MCV, MCHC, MCH, but you're also running an iron panel, and that iron panel should include a total iron binding capacity. It should include ferritin. Those should all be inclusive of evaluating iron status. And so a lot of doctors won't measure all of those tests. They'll just measure a CBC. So you've got to jump into a doc who knows how to, again, who functionally evaluate nutrition. I spent years learning how to do this properly. And a lot of doctors, and I don't say this to again, if you guys listen to the summit, I'm not anti-medicine and I'm not anti-medical practitioners, but they just don't have the formal training in nutrition. And I have over 10,000 hours in formal training in nutrition. And that is exceedingly rare in today's world amongst doctors. It's just not something that doctors seek out as part of the profession. And it's not something that's taught in medical school. So you've got to find, again, a good qualified functional medicine doc who's got good training and good experience. Okay. There will be a replay of this webinar. That's a good question. So no transcript, but there will be a replay. You guys will get a replay link probably sometime tomorrow. So if you want to spend more time taking notes and rewriting, it's going to be available for you to do that. Okay, next question. Let's see here. Can anything be done to improve Sjogren's syndrome, extreme dry eyes, dry mouth, and will taking the autoimmune supplement bundle help? Very possibly so, but again, with Sjogren's, you've got to go back to fundamentals. The autoimmune bundle will help modulate inflammation, and it will help the process of beginning to reset the gut function, which can be very, very important for autoimmune disease, including Sjogren's. But if there are missing trigger elements, you might continue to struggle. You've got to figure out what those missing trigger elements are. And so the best way to go about doing that is again, have your functional medicine doctor check you. Have your doctor check you for nutritional deficiencies, infections, for chemical exposures, and for food reactions. Those are the four fundamental pieces. You've got to get those checked. I'm going to emphasize that over and over and over again, folks, because if you don't get that checked and you're still struggling, you're going to continue to struggle. My entire practice is nothing but people who have done the programs. They've been on every program that you see on every summit. They've done them all. They've tried them all. They've done every supplement thing you could do, and they're still struggling. And the reason they're still struggling because nobody sat down with them and comprehensively approached it without piecemealing them. It cannot be done in a piecemeal fashion. You've got to dive in, and you've got to dive in heavy. Now, that being said, that's not to say some people that do go through these programs don't get better. For some, going through the program is enough, but for many who still struggle, it's not enough. And in those cases, you really have to dial it in. Sheila's saying that I have high ferritin levels. However, when I tried to donate blood, I was told that my iron was too low to donate. Is there a difference? Yes. Iron in the blood deficiency of iron in the blood is anemia. Okay. That being the case, ferritin is iron storage in the liver. Now, there's another reason ferritin can be high that has nothing to do with iron toxicity. It has to do with liver damage. So, Sheila, elevations in ferritin can mean that your liver is damaged, that you actually have liver damage. So it's important now, knowing that you have anemia in the state of liver damage. That's a possibility. So I would get back with your doctor, okay, and have them run some liver function tests and have them evaluate your liver for potential damage, because that's typically why we'll see high ferritin in the presence of low iron. So have that looked at. Very, very important, because if your liver's taking on damage, your detoxification is going to suffer, and a lot of other processes are going to suffer as a result of that. Okay, Lisa, can I still purchase the summit? Yes, you can. Go to autoimmunerevolution.org. There should be a way that there should be a link on that page where you can still purchase the event if you're still interested in getting it. Let's see here. I don't know how to pronounce this, so if I mangle your name, I apologize. Asta. I was wondering what I could take to get rid of Giardia while breastfeeding on a GAPS-style protocol. I have taken Flagyl, but a week after treatment, my symptoms came back, so I'm currently taking raw garlic, olive oil, extract ginger, Ceylon cinnamon, and clove. Can't do milk kefir. I wouldn't recommend milk kefir either way. So yeah, I mean, there's a number of different things that can be taken. Wormwood is effective, but if you're breastfeeding, that might upset your baby's stomach. I would say the first question that I would have in this scenario is, do you even have Giardia? Was it formally diagnosed, or was it accurately diagnosed, or is it somebody's guess? Because Flagyl and other medications to treat parasites can be quite dangerous, especially if you're breastfeeding. This stuff comes through the breast milk and not all medications, but some medications can come through the breast milk. Some elements can come through the breast milk and create problems for the baby. So I would confirm that you actually have an accurate diagnosis of Giardia before making the assumption. I see this all the time in the clinic where people think they have Giardia because they have gut symptoms, but what they really have is a completely different problem. So I'd confirm the diagnosis with your doc first. Okay. Barbara's asking what an initial assessment with me entails. The best way, I don't want to waste the time, not to say that that's a waste of time, Barbara, but I don't want to spend the time going through all those details. What I would encourage anyone to do, if you're absolutely interested and serious about being healthy and you want to get an entail of what it takes to come through my clinic, call 281-240-2229. And I'm going to leave that number in the chat box down here for you guys. Call and talk with Shelly or Kate or one of our customer service liaisons, and they'll get you all the answers and all the details, so that you know exactly what we do and how we go about our business here. Do I know anyone? Candace is asking if I know anyone who offers training interpreting blood work within a holistic framework. Again, it's hard for me to vouch for this because a lot of the training is not formal. There's not like a formal school where there's like true interpretation being taught, but probably good places to start. Now, if you're a doctor, or if you're a healthcare provider, Functional Medicine University is an online program that you can check out. And I can vouch for that program. I've actually gone through it years and years ago, and it's a great program. The Institute for Functional Medicine has a program as well. So those programs are good places maybe to start the process of looking. But if you're not a doctor, it might be a little bit science heavy and might be a little frustrating for you to go through. So just depending on what your background and information is. I mean, there's a reason why doctors go to school for years and years and years to learn this stuff. So, those are the programs that I would recommend. What can high neutrophils on a CBC mean? Typically high neutrophils, depending on whether or not you're talking about high neutrophils by percentage or high neutrophils by absolute count, high absolute neutrophils can mean an infection. And typically it can mean a bacterial infection, but it doesn't have to mean that. High neutrophils by percent, depending on whether or not what the other white blood cells are doing. The other white blood cells, so there's 5 different types of white blood cells. There's neutrophils, there's lymphocytes, there's basophils, there's eosinophils, and there's mastocytes, or sometimes referred to as I'm having a brain fart here. Sometimes referred to as mastocytes. So if you look at those different types and look at the percentages, your general percentages should be that 60% of your total overall white blood cell count should be neutrophils, 30% should be lymphocytes, and then you have a varying degree of percentage on down the list. So like if we're looking at basophils and eosinophils, those are going to be 1 to 3% of the total overall. So looking at those can give you a lot of information, but high neutrophils can typically mean that you have an infection, can typically mean that infection is bacterial. High lymphocytes on a CBC can mean that you have a viral infection. But again, those are insights and clues. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is. It's just, it's a possibility of what it could be, because there are certain drugs that can elevate neutrophils. There are certain medications that can influence white blood cell counts as well. Okay. Mary Beth, brain fart showing my military background. Yeah, I do have a military background. It's good to find the humor sometimes. Thank you. let's see here. Do I recommend that women attempt to resolve autoimmune conditions before trying to get pregnant? Oh, I love this question, Elise. Yes, and here's why. During pregnancy, you'll release a hormone that suppresses the immune system because your immune system doesn't want to attack the fetus. So your body's immune system will naturally be suppressed for that reason. When women oftentimes come out of pregnancy, if they had pre-existing autoimmune disease, the flare-up is tremendous, meaning they went through a period of remission, but it was pseudo-remission because their immune system was being suppressed because of the pregnancy. And when the pregnancy ends, the autoimmune disease comes roaring back, and it comes roaring back in a big way. So I would say if you're trying to get pregnant, the smartest thing to do to have a healthy baby anyway is to find out if you have autoimmune disease is to knock it out. Is figure out why, because that's going to maximize the health of your baby. And so doing that also is going to prevent any kind of symptomatic rebound after the pregnancy. So I love that question. Great question. Okay. Another question, Lisa, my son burps up stomach acid frequently. Does that fall under acid reflux? Yes and no. I mean, acid reflux means that acid is regurgitating up, and that could be, burping up stomach acid. Is it stomach acid or is it stomach irritant? I mean, there's no way to know because there's no test that definitively tells us this. But a lot of people don't have acid reflux. They actually have poor digestion. They have low stomach acid. So when they eat food, and that low stomach acid doesn't help digest their food, then the food sits in the stomach and starts to rot. And then we get regurgitation of the irritant food. And that's what mimics acid reflux. So again, that's just because that's happening to your son doesn't mean that it's acid reflux. The best way to try to help to determine a really quick home remedy that can be done is have your son take apple cider vinegar before the meal. And if that resolves the problem, then the issue probably has to do with him not making enough stomach acid versus him having acid reflux itself. Okay. Let's see here. Angela asks, if I work with young children, what about immunizations contributing to altering immune system function? Yes, I work with young children. No, I do not recommend immunizations. I know a lot of people will be, counter argue that. There's a lot of opinions on immunization. There's a lot of polarized opinions on it. In my experience, those with autoimmune disease are not candidates for autoimmune disease. Are not candidates for immunization because they're the ones at greatest risk for vaccine damage. But the other big reason is a lot of people with autoimmune disease very commonly have egg allergies, very commonly have heavy metal burdens and heavy metal problems and aluminum and mercury problems already. So injecting those people is actually going to contribute to the autoimmune process and create a severe flare-up or increase the risk of autistic development. So, I'm not a big fan of immunizations in the wrong population, and even in the right population, I think it's debatable. It's a big question. There's actually an event coming up. I'll send out an email to all of you. There's an event on immunizations coming up that will answer a lot of these questions for you as well. Okay. How do you gain weight grain-free? Easy. If you're struggling with weight gain, oftentimes what happens, you're struggling with weight gain because the grain that you're eating is damaging your gut and not allowing you to absorb nutrients appropriately. So your body can't heal and repair, and it's in a catabolic breakdown state. If you're gluten sensitive and you take the grain out, the inflammation can be dramatically reduced and the catabolic state can go away. And that gives your body the resources and tools to heal and absorb and digest the nutrients and start repairing tissue, therefore leading to weight gain. We see this all the time in the clinic, patients who struggle with weight gain until they cut out grain. A lot of people think I'm going to cut out grain and I'm going to lose weight because I'm losing a source of calories. That's just not true. It's a very, very rare thing. Now, sometimes we'll see initial weight loss, but generally what happens is after that initial weight loss, it'll stabilize and then we'll start putting weight back on. Deb's asking about autoimmune disease and pH. pH is overblown. A lot of people, have this super hyper focused pH approach to health. pH stands for power of hydrogen. People talk about the alkaline diets. People talk about eating foods that are acidic. Look, just because you eat something that's acidic doesn't mean that your pH is going to become abnormally acidic. And just because you eat something that's alkaline doesn't mean that your pH is magically going to become alkaline. It's about balance. It's about eating healthy foods that are for you. It's not about following an alkaline diet. It's not about following a very rigid pH controlled diet. Your body self-regulates pH if you provide it with what it needs for what it needs. And everybody's body is uniquely different. So figuring that is the most important element. Don't spend a lot of time running to the store, spitting and peeing on pH strips and panicking every time it doesn't come back alkaline. That just it's a stressful way to live, and it's not really gonna alleviate your problem. Do I recommend bone broth, and can it cause constipation? Yeah, it can, because depending on the bone broth, because it's very high in amino acids, proline, lysine, and sometimes it can be very heavy on the stomach and very thick. So yeah, it can, but it doesn't always. So the issue there is, yes, I recommend it. It's a good healthy food that people can consume, especially when they're having a hard time digesting. It's a liquid nutrition. But it's not the miracle food that everybody has to have to heal. So if you can tolerate it well, use it. It can be a helpful part of your diet, but it's not a necessity to heal. Okay. How do we build up gut bacteria if you are missing over half the species like in Crohn's? Do you have a supplement that can build this up? Well, the first thing you've got to do to build back up gut bacteria is you've got to take out what's causing the poor levels of gut bacteria. And for most people, it's feeding the gut bacteria improperly, or it's feeding the wrong species of bacteria. So you got to take away the wrong food. So what is the wrong food? The wrong food is anything processed, any sugars that are processed. I'm not talking about honey. I'm not talking about maple. I'm talking about processed sugars, things that come in packages and wrappers, food synthetic flavorings, GMOs, things with pesticides. These are the things that destroy your gut bacteria. Chlorine destroys your gut bacteria. You've got to filter the chlorine and chloramines out of your water. So these are the smart, kind of common sense things that you want to do to set the stage for healthy bacterial growth. Spend time outside. Spend time in the garden. Get dirt. Get dirty. Dirty is one of the ways, and I'm not talking about airport dirty. I'm talking about your house dirty. I'm talking about your backyard dirty. I'm not talking about public space dirty. So that's one of the best ways to get good probiotics, along with taking a probiotic. Again, go back to the autoimmune bundle that I put up on the screen. It's one of the best, most diverse, helpful probiotics for recovering gut bacteria and diversity within the GI tract. That's why I use it. So the phone, Angela's asking if the phone number I mentioned on my website. You can go to drpeterosborne.com, drpeterosborne.com, and click on clinic, and you can find how to contact my clinic on that website. Okay, we are going to have to start thinking about wrapping it up. We're going on almost on 2 hours. So last couple of things here. So what we're going to do next is we're going to be posting this replay, and for those of you who want to take notes and watch it again. And again, we're also going to be sending you, anybody who takes advantage of the autoimmune bundle today, we're going to be sending you the 2-hour and 15-minute presentation on the autoimmune matrix. So that many of you keep asking, and the question comes up over and over again: what do you do? What specifically do you do? What specific tests do you do for autoimmune recovery? All that's in that. All that information is in there. It's very detailed and it's very mapped out. So again, I highly encourage you to either, one, take advantage of the Autoimmune Revolution Summit package if you haven't already, or two, take advantage of the autoimmune bundle today. Get what we see clinically works very, very well with patients, but also get the resources to help you navigate this road. You'll also get the 4-page instruction manual that comes with that protocol. And again, if you have any more questions we're gonna be rolling out some new information. Again, I posted the link earlier to our Facebook page. Stay tuned in to that. And if you're not signed up for my newsletter, just go to glutenfreesociety.org. Make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter. This is how we communicate to you. And this is how we roll out new information and give you the answers and the updates to questions as they come to you. So I highly encourage you to get involved within our newsletter if you want to stay abreast and up to date on the latest health information. We do our best to try to keep you updated. So again, thank you so much for attending. I know your day is valuable and your time is valuable. Thank you for spending it with me. I had a great time. I love educating. So again, this is Dr. Osborne, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon and a blessed day.